Coming up, after losing to Texas A&M on Saturday, things aren't great for Alabama coach Nick Saban, but at least one anonymous SEC coach thinks they're about to get worse. We'll tell you about that, plus preview the big game between Tennessee and Ole Miss. It's all on the way next on SEC Country Live. Hello, everybody. Welcome into SEC Country Live. I'm Brandon Adams. Happy to have you with us here today. We've got a lot to look at around the SEC. Later on, we'll talk to Jason Swain, former Tennessee wide receiver, on the Vols. Big sellout. Expectations high, as Tennessee is looking pretty good over the course of the last couple of weeks. Dominant blowout wins against Missouri and South Carolina, and now a step up in weight class against Ole Miss, fresh off Ole Miss's win against Arkansas. This will be a fun preview with Jason Swain coming up in a little less than 10 minutes from right now. Before that, though, let's get ready to go above the fold here on SEC Country Live here today. And obviously, Alabama is reeling a bit after its loss to Texas A&M this past Saturday. And things apparently could get even worse in the weeks to come. Let me try to take a moment to explain to you as to why. We obviously know that Nick Saban, in the aftermath of the success that he's enjoyed the last couple of years, has certainly patted himself on the back for his willingness to evolve, his willingness to change with the times, his willingness to become something different as a coach than he ever could have imagined that he would be going back years ago. In fact, let me go back to last spring here for a moment. In March, speaking about the way in which Saban views the sport now, dramatically different than he would have at one point in time in terms of the balance between offense and defense and what actually rules on a college football gridiron. Let's go back and hear Nick Saban from March.
Coach, got to ask, your friend Jimbo said yesterday.
This is Jimbo Fisher.
At some point while you're in Tuscaloosa.
Do we have the other Saban quote?
The game is different now. People score fast. I grew up with the idea that you play good defense, you run the ball, you control vertical field position on special teams, and you're going to win. Whoever rushes the ball the most for the most yards is going to win the game. You're not going to win anything now doing that. Because the way the spread is, the way the rules are to run RPOs, the way the rules are that you can block downfield and throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, those rules have changed college football. All right, and no huddle fastball has changed college football. So I changed my philosophy about 5 or 6 years ago. All right, and it was more than that. When Lane came here, we said we got to outscore him.
So he says, listen, when Lane Kiffin came here as my offensive coordinator in 2014, we changed everything about the way we went about business because football is obviously different than it used to be. But when you watch the struggles of a Nick Saban defense again on Saturday against Texas A&M, I think some folks are left to wonder, has the sport really changed as much as Nick Saban thinks it has, or is it that Alabama has kind of changed over the course of the last couple of years? With that in mind, I thought that Matt Hayes, veteran college football writer now working for Saturday Down South, had a very interesting column the other day where he looked at the evolution of Alabama, maybe a de-evolution a little bit defensively. It's been true that Alabama's changed for the better offensively. Maybe defensively the opposite of that has been true. And the one thing that Hayes pointed out specifically that's different about Alabama now is the fact that Kirby Smart, now Georgia head coach, is no longer defensive coordinator there. And not only has Smart taken probably some schematic ideas with him to Athens that no longer present there in Tuscaloosa, the other thing that he's taken with him is that tenacious approach to recruiting. All the elite five-star guys that at one point in time populated the Alabama defense are now completely on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia obviously leads the nation in virtually every defensive category. The first-team offense gave up its first touchdown of the year on Saturday against Auburn. That gives you an idea of just how dominant this group has been. And what Matt Hayes, who knows the sport pretty well, has said is that is a level of dominance that Alabama used to have when Kirby Smart was defensive coordinator, but has found very difficult to replicate in the time since Kirby Smart has left Tuscaloosa. Now, I realize that Alabama fans don't like this very much, but also if you're willing to be honest and admit, while Jeremy Pruitt stood in as a very capable replacement for Smart in the immediate aftermath of Smart's decision to go become Georgia head coach, your defensive coordinator since then, Tosh LaPoy, you didn't like him at all. You told me that plenty of times. Pete Golding, the defensive coordinator you got now, you don't like him either, and it's games like Saturday that kind of stand out as a reason for that. that whether it be the schematic advantage the defensive coordinator gives you or the recruiting tenacity that a guy like Kirby Smart provided, Alabama seemingly just doesn't have that anymore in the aftermath of Smart now being at Georgia instead of Alabama. So says Matt Hayes from Saturday Down South. In fact, Hayes actually takes this a step further there as well, getting a quote from an anonymous SEC coach in light of Alabama's loss to Texas A&M and what Georgia's doing defensively right now, really very closely embodying some of the things that used to be a hallmark of the very best Alabama teams. What Hayes gets an SEC coach to say to him, at least on anonymous terms, is that eventually the old blueprint, the old formula that used to be in place at Alabama, that may be the formula that's in place in Georgia right now. Let me see if I can read this quote. This is an anonymous SEC coach speaking to Matt Hayes, Saturday Down South, saying that Kirby is going to finally beat Nick Saban and win the whole thing, meaning the national championship, by doing exactly what Nick got away from doing. Now, isn't that a fascinating viewpoint there? Isn't that a fascinating thought? That Nick Saban goes around, coaches clinics, and all the interviews that he does during the offseason, talking about how much football has changed and how proud he is of the fact that he recognized that and made those changes. And yet here we are in 2021 where defense has led Georgia now to be the number one team in the country after beating Auburn this past Saturday. And it's the lack of defense, the lack of the ability to get big stops, giving one of the most successful quarterbacking performances that Alabama has ever allowed under Nick Saban came this past Saturday to the unheralded, virtually unknown Zach Calzada, the backup quarterback for Texas A&M. That maybe the sport from a defensive standpoint hasn't changed as much as Nick Saban says it has. Now, wouldn't that be a disaster for Saban if he had to watch that unfold? If he had to watch Georgia go on to win a national championship, to lose another game to a former assistant in the SEC championship, or maybe again in the college football playoff if those two teams were to be rematched there, wouldn't that be a disaster to see not only an offensive guy like Jimbo Fisher be the first to best him, be the first to get the win against him head-to-head, but also now having to watch one of his former assistants, Kirby Smart, doing it, and by really doing it in the brand of football that Nick Saban would prefer, by being the defensive-minded guy, by being the tougher, more physical team, and to see Saban get beat that way, I think that'd be even worse for him probably than losing to Jimbo Fisher this past Saturday. Speaking of Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M, let's kind of shift gears slightly to this as we're still above the fold here on SEC Country Live. So a lot of you remember back during the offseason when Texas A&M coach Jimbo Fisher was, like so many coaches do this time of year, or that time during the year, making that trip around, doing the rubber chicken circuit, talking about his team, firing up his boosters. And at one point in time in one of these events, he was asked about beating Alabama or having to wait until Nick Saban was no longer in Tuscaloosa to see Texas A&M really emerge and win a championship for the very first time. And what Jimbo Fisher said, the way that a lot of guys say when it comes to a lot of these booster club type events is, we're not going to wait till Nick Saban's retired. We're going to kick his behind while he's still at Alabama. It was big talk from Jimbo Fisher, and it got the attention of Nick Saban. The reason why it got the attention of Nick Saban was a reporter asked him about it directly. Well, now in light of what we've seen happen here last Saturday, maybe all of this needs to be reconsidered. So let's go back in time for a moment. Another chance to hear Nick Saban, this time being questioned about what Jimbo Fisher, the boast, the brag, that he was going to beat Alabama. He was going to beat his old boss, Nick Saban. And boy, at the time, Nick Saban was feeling pretty good about himself. Let's listen to Coach Saban here again.
Coach, got to ask, your friend Jimbo said yesterday that at some point while you're in Tuscaloosa, he was going to beat your butt. That wasn't the word that he used, but did you have any response for that?
In golf?
I think you meant on the football field.
Well, I'm sure there'll come a day, but is that what he's talking about? Football?
He was talking about football.
Oh, he was? Well, it used to be on my noontime basketball league, I guess. We're no longer partners, when it comes to that. Coach. Now, they have a really good team, really good program, and, they're getting better and better all the time, and there's a lot of challenges in the SEC, and they're certainly one of the up-and-coming programs, and he's always been a great coach, did a great job for us when he was with us, and he's had a great career as a head coach. So, it's going to be a challenge for us, no doubt, when we have to play him.
So it's all laughs right there, right? Everybody's having a good time. Ha, ha, ha. You see me talking about beating me in golf? Is that what he says there? Well, no, it wasn't golf. He was talking about football, and that's exactly what Jimbo Fisher's team went out and did. And if a guy like Fisher has the willingness to call his own shot the way that he did in that moment, I think you got to get a little more. I think you've got to give him a little bit of credit for it. I think you've got to say that, hey, you know what, he did that. And by the way, the whole idea of is he going to beat us in golf or whatever else? Well, the Texas A&M social media crew had some fun with this. We have the screen grab. Can we show the Aggies social media crew kind of showing off the golf scorecard with Big Al losing, the 12th man winning? I think we may have that. Let's try to show that there if we can. There you go. Yeah, Texas A&M football having some fun with that. The 12th man had 41. Big Al had 38. Normally in golf, it's the lower score that wins. But in this case, it was Texas A&M who was looking pretty good. And I think that Jimbo Fisher calling his own shot against Nick Saban is probably worthy of some credit. We'll take some of your comments about this coming up on both Facebook and YouTube. But as promised, let's also keep it going here right now with a look ahead to the big game coming up on Saturday in the SEC. Neyland Stadium packed and sold out once again. And the Vols riding high with Ole Miss coming into town. The ex-head coach of the Vols laying Kiffin in tow with them. Let's talk to a guy who knows Tennessee football very well, the former wide receiver there in Knoxville with the Vols, Jason Swain, who does a great show out of Tennessee each and every day. He joins us here on SEC Country Live. Jason, welcome back to our program. We appreciate your time with us and certainly appreciate you helping us preview this game with Tennessee and Ole Miss coming up.
Oh, heck yeah. Thank y'all for having me.
So you and I talked a couple times during the offseason, and I think you'd probably agree with me that the overall mood in Knoxville at the time was not all that positive. Tennessee fans have been through a lot, right? Coaches fired and rebooting the program over and over. And certainly for me, a couple hundred miles away from Knoxville, when I looked at the outlook for the Vols, I certainly didn't see the wins that they've gotten and really even playing tough in a couple of the losses. I've been very impressed with what I've seen. How has the mood maybe changed now around the Tennessee program, given the fact that over the course of the last couple of weeks, this team is playing much better?
The mood is good. I mean, and the mood is where it is because of the play of the football team, not just because they're just winning, but because they're truly giving their all for Tennessee. This team is closer than they have been in years. The coaching is certainly there with Tim Banks on defense side of the football, Rodney Garner, Willie Martinez. I mean, these guys are noticeably getting more out of less, and we see the coaching. And so for football fans here in Tennessee, they've watched a lot, they've seen a lot, they know their football, so they understand that coaching is going on. They can see these guys playing with a purpose, playing fast, and being prideful of wearing that power tee on their helmet each and every Saturday. So they're seeing results, and I think that's why fans right now are happy. I think that's why we have seen our first sellout in a very, very long time, because the product on the football field has been good. And that's, support has never been a problem here at the University of Tennessee. I mean, the fans have supported this program in the midst of the down decade, but right now it's been a long time, so fans are getting kind of tired of it. Apathy was sitting in, but the apathy right now is wearing off.
Certainly very interesting when you see Ole Miss obviously getting the win against Arkansas. They're not stopping anybody defensively, though, right now, and there's obviously expectation for a lot of points on both sides on Saturday there as well. And I'm sure for Tennessee fans right now, this Ole Miss game, Matt Krause, a Heisman Trophy candidate, of course, but this Ole Miss game must feel like another winnable opportunity for Tennessee this weekend, too.
No, for sure. I mean, we look at Ole Miss's defense. I mean, the great Bart Scott would say, they can't stop a nosebleed. And South Carolina hasn't been able to do that. Mizzou hasn't been able to do that. Now, Ole Miss is better, but certainly they have issues stopping people, too. Their defense is a little different than what we're used to seeing in the SEC. Normally you see that defense ran by, Conference USA teams or AAC teams or teams that don't have a lot of personnel, so they try to trick you and fool you with more guys standing up and speed. So it's a great opportunity for Tennessee to run the football, and I think that's going to be the key. Time of possession, which it seems like neither team or offense really respects, but a premium will be put on football for sure.
What's it like with Lane Kiffin coming back on Saturday? I always feel like in the aftermath of Kiffin being coach there, the attitude around Kiffin's a little different than I think it might be. It seems like there's some Tennessee fans that still kind of like him. Maybe that's changing a little bit now that he's kind of a foe in this game against Ole Miss. But this was a kind of a controversial exit after 1 year with the program, and certainly Kiffin seems to like to mention the Vols on social media a pretty good bit. What kind of reception do you think he gets in Neyland Stadium on Saturday?
I mean, I think he'll get booed. I mean, he was booed when he came here as a coordinator with Alabama. But, I know Lane likes to make it about himself. He loves the attention, and that's good for his program. It's good for recruiting. But, this game is more than just about Lane Kiffin. It's about both teams that in the last couple of years have struggled and lost some key games, and now they're playing well under their new coach. Lane has been there 2 years. Josh Heupel is in his first year. But yeah, the reception, it won't be warm at first, but I think after that wears off, it'll be football as football always is in the stadium at 7:30. The key SEC games where two teams are pretty much evenly matched. So yeah, I know the media, and I'm part of the media. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
It's been great to get the callers calling in and trashing on Lane a little bit. It's always fun and funny, but it's about these players going out there and executing, and the team that does that will be the team that wins.
Well, listen, Jason, we certainly appreciate your perspective here on Tennessee. It's going to be such a fun game on Saturday night. Neyland Stadium should truly be rocking. And as you said, you're in the media. You're talking about this team all the time and got great insight on what's going on there with Tennessee. So for the folks who are tuned in to us and want to find out more about this big game on Saturday, or really all the other stuff going on with Tennessee football this time of year, how can they catch up with you online?
Well, you can do that. I'm on Twitter at Swain Event. Facebook, our page is Swain Event there. But you can download our free Swain Event app for Android, Apple devices. We stream our show live each and every weekday, 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and then we podcast everything. So you can go to our app and listen to any parts of the show that you missed. We also video stream our show on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and on Facebook Live. So we try to be everywhere your listeners are and your viewers. So if they want to catch us and know more about Tennessee, you can follow us there.
Sounds great, Jason, and you're doing a great job. We appreciate your time here today, and we'll look forward to hopefully getting a chance to speak to you soon.
Let's do it. Thank y'all.
All right, good stuff there. Jason Swain from the Swain Event, terrific host up there in Tennessee, former Vols receiver, doing a great job all the way around. Now, I know a lot of you want to react to whether it's a preview of Tennessee, Ole Miss, or the aftermath of Alabama's loss to Texas A&M. How much credit does Jimbo Fisher get? He called his shot there. And what about the idea that in the aftermath of Kirby Smart no longer being in Alabama, Alabama really hasn't been the same. And the Georgia defense right now looks like the kind of unit that Alabama once put together year after year after year when Smart was defensive coordinator there. How is all of that impacting the race in the SEC right now? Your comments on Facebook and YouTube coming up on that very topic. Before that, though, let me remind you about my friends at Merriweather and Tharp. I am sitting here right now in our palatial studios. By the way, the next time you see us, we won't actually be in this studio anymore. But nonetheless, we will still be doing the show. And when I sit here in the Atlanta area where our studios are, one of the things that I can tell you is just a short drive from where I am right now are my friends at Merriweather and Tharp. We say that they're your source for Georgia divorce. They live in the state of Georgia, obviously, but they're also a resource for you, whatever state you find yourself in around SEC country, Florida, Alabama, the Carolinas, into Mississippi, Louisiana, all of that. And their website, theatlantadivorceteam.com, provides a ton of free resources because when it comes to the divorce process, if you find yourself about to go through that, you've got questions. And Merriweather and Tharp provides clear, concise answers that get you to the next step that you need to be it. Take advantage of all those free resources. It's blog posts, it's podcasts, it's a chance to have a free initial consultation there as well. You can set all of that up and set yourself up on a path towards a happy resolution to the situation you might find yourself in right now, which I know divorce can be scary and confusing, one of the most challenging things you can ever go through. But when you have Merriweather and Tharp on your side, you're going to find out that the entire process is easier to understand. The entire process is easier to navigate. That is some of what Merriweather and Tharp can do for you. So they're based here in Georgia, but they can be a resource to you wherever you are. So please find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. That'll get you in touch with Merriweather and Tharp. All right, as promised, let's get some comments. We'll do a couple of YouTubes here just because that's the section I have up right now. We'll do some Facebook comments, then we'll bounce out of here after that. Bo Molinari says it's pathetic the way the media straight roots for Alabama. You know, maybe that's the case. I wonder if that is. I mean, I think there is some excitement here in 2021 about the possibility, and it seems now more than a possibility. It seems reality that this is the kind of year where weird things are happening around college football, and the chance at, you know, some surprise entrance to the college football playoff, not the same teams, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, which have been there so much. It seems like in some form or fashion, you've got some different teams who are going to have a chance to make it in this year. And I think to a degree, there's a lot of college football fans, college football media, you mentioned in particular, that seem to be pretty happy with that all the way around. But clearly there's a lot of chatter coming out of A&M's victory against Texas A&M this past Saturday. Blake Robinson checks in to say, how's it going, BA? Just getting to join. Been a little busy to start my work day, but I got a few minutes to say hey and listen in. Good game from UGA last Saturday. Blake, appreciate that. Of course, a lot of you know my other job, apart from doing SEC Country Live each week, is I host Dog Nation Daily. Big UGA guy. So I am proud of the way that my favorite team is playing right now. Pretty happy with Georgia along those lines. Blake's also one of our frequent commenters, and he is an Auburn fan there too. And listen, I think the first year of Brian Harsin gives you some things to feel pretty good about. I would say that the race right now to be the SEC's best first-year coach is probably being won by Josh Heupel, who we talked about with Jason Swain a moment ago. But I would say that Tennessee, or I should say that Auburn thus far this season, has shown you some things. Let's see, get a couple more comments here for a moment. By the way, Bo also says that Kiffin is a clown, and that's certainly been a hot topic as of late on this show, going back to what Michael Wilbon said the other day. All right, over here on Facebook for a moment, we'll take a few comments there. Smooth Smith says another overrated Florida Gator team will lose to the Dogs easy. So already a little bit of chatter starting with that Georgia-Florida game, still 2 weeks away, but already, or more than 2 weeks away, but you're getting a lot of chatter in this comment section about that. That's always fun to see. Deontay Julian says the Tide got rolled on Saturday, and boy, wasn't that the case. Manuel and Glenda Davis says Georgia's not Florida. No pity for the oh, my goodness. Y'all are fun. Kentucky is in trouble, says Kevin Cook. Dogs getting healthy at the right time. Yeah, that's Georgia's opponent on Saturday. Another chance to show some of what we talked about off the top of the program, the physicality that Georgia's displaying, probably better offensively than it's been at this point in time under the Smart era. Still not as good as the elite offenses in college football have been the last couple of years, but scoring far more points per game than we're typically used to seeing from those Kirby Smart teams. And, you know, another chance for Georgia. Game day is going to be there. CBS, the 3:30 kick for Georgia. And once again, Georgia a very big favorite here in the spot. Georgia proved itself to be the number one team in the country last week, got all the votes in the Associated Press poll, and now I guess with a big performance on Saturday can extend its lead there as the number one team in the country here there as well. Cody Taylor says, I'm calling it now, the War Smeagol's, he says, are going to send Saban into retirement. So we've already seen Saban lose Texas A&M. We had an anonymous SEC coach predict that he's also about to lose to Georgia in the SEC championship, and now Cody Taylor checking in to say that he thinks that Auburn may beat Alabama too. So things are rough right now for at least Nick Saban in this comment section here today. Jeff Thor, going back to that Georgia-Kentucky game, says the Kentucky offense has no chance. And as of right now, no one's had much of a chance against this Georgia defense. Daphne Roth says, I'm always sticking with the Tide. I was there when we were losing on the regular, and I'll be there if we go there again. Some fans really don't know how to lose with grace and still keep the faith, and you know the press is no help. And it is kind of funny, Daphne. I mean, Alabama has lost so infrequently that I guess part of me kind of wonders, and I was watching the Alabama-Texas A&M game on my phone as we were coming back from Auburn this past weekend, and part of me kind of wonders, you know, how do Alabama fans handle losing when they have so little practice at it, which in a lot of ways is a compliment for what Alabama's been as a program. But Daphne says that she was there before all this winning. She'll still be there after it's done. But for a lot of Alabama fans, they just don't have a lot of practice getting used to it, and I'm imagining that's probably a pretty tough thing to handle. A few more comments there, too. Let's get a few more. Rich Blanchard checks in to say, here we go with the anonymous random coach said nonsense, and he gives the laughing emojis about that. I mean, it's always, here's the thing, whether it be, you know, veteran writer like Matt Hayes or whether it be preseason magazine, it's just easier to get coaches to say something interesting off the record than they will say it on the record. And I think it's probably a pretty fair trade, at least for somebody like me. Like, I'm in the entertainment business, and so I'll take an interesting quote, even if it requires an anonymous source to provide it. I don't mind telling you that. I will allow the anonymity to get the more interesting quote because it's just more entertaining for the audience. That is a trade I'm happily willing to make, and in this particular case, I think that's probably true once again. Tennille Calvino checking in. Delbert Barrett says, I am sure Kentucky's going to get Georgia's full attention. It's going to be a good game. Keith Barber checking in to say, y'all are crazy, just trying to stir things up. He'll be there as long as he wants to be. Yeah, I don't think anybody, at least on this side of the camera, is saying that Nick Saban's in danger of leaving Alabama anytime soon. But I think that when you see Alabama, once really impenetrable, won 100 games in a row against unranked opponents, never had lost 24 in a row to former Saban assistants. When you see some of those bulletproof resume items that Nick Saban has had, when you see some of those things punctured a bit, it does start causing you to ask some questions. And when you see Alabama defensively get torched by Calzada the way that they did, I think the specific question that gets asked off the top of the show is, well, what happened to that Alabama defense? And the simplest, most succinct answer is, Kirby Smart's not been there for a few years. The coordinators that have replaced him for the most part have been failures. And Alabama's ability to acquire that five-star talent on defense is not what it once was. Alabama, in a lot of ways, has become a finesse program. And that's what it's become. It's less about running the football than it used to be. It's less about playing defense than it used to be. Greatest collection of wide receivers I've ever seen. 3 different former quarterbacks currently starting in the NFL. That's all really good stuff to have for your program, and it's been the recipe for national championships. And in 2020, you can make a case for one of the great teams in the modern age. It's worked to the tune of championships. But this team that used to be defined by physicality is now a little bit more about finesse. And that's fine as long as the whole sport's moving in that direction. But once you move so far in that direction that you trade the identity that you used to have, now it becomes a little bit of a problem. It was against Texas A&M last week, and at least one person, maybe more, saying it could be a problem against Georgia in the SEC championship there too. Jeremy Pettis, who's an Alabama fan, says that the current praise, as he calls them, the mutts, the defense is rat boys, and obviously referencing another Nick Saban quote there. So pretty good comments here continuing to roll through, and we will take those with you there for a moment. We heard Jason Swain talk about Lane Kiffin's return. Swain talked about Lane. We heard Jason Swain talk about Lane Kiffin's return to Tennessee on Saturday as the head coach of Ole Miss. As Jason correctly points out, he's been back to Knoxville before as the offensive coordinator at Alabama, and it sounds like when Lane brings those Rebels into Knoxville on Saturday, he's going to be finding himself in pretty hostile territory, not just because Tennessee fans want to boo him, but Tennessee fans apparently want to cheer their own team as well. And this is something that Ole Miss coach Lane Kiffin has said this week, that he and his team are getting prepared for the environment they expect to find coming into Knoxville on Saturday. Let's give you a chance to hear Lane Kiffin on that topic.
Getting ready for a challenging place to play. As someone said on the way in, is on schedule to be their first sellout in years, so very loud place, especially at night, and a team that's playing extremely well. 2 conference blowouts in a row, and lighting up on offense. So this is going to be extremely challenging.
I think the thing that Kiffin points out there at the end is also very true. In addition to the crowd atmosphere that's expected to be at Neyland Stadium, the fact this Tennessee offense has been everything that Josh Heupel could have hoped it would be, the big point totals. Now, they've done that against overmatched SEC teams, a bad South Carolina team, an even worse Missouri team. That's certainly true, but at the beginning of the year, we would have thought, at least I would have thought, I don't mind. Listen, if I'm going to be a blowhard into this microphone and scream into this camera, I've got to, give myself credit when I get things right. I've got to give myself criticism when I get things wrong. And the thing that thus far, through the first half of the regular season, I have been the most wrong on was how bad I thought Tennessee would be. Probably thought this would be the worst team in the, one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in the SEC. And that's turned out not to be the case at all. In fact, the teams that Tennessee are beating up on, one of the reasons why I'm going to give the Vols credit for that is because before the year began, I would have assumed those teams were probably better than what than what Tennessee was bringing to the table. That has turned out not to be the case. They have had great success here thus far. You got to give them credit, and they want to take it to the next level on Saturday there at Neyland Stadium against the Rebels. In fact, there's been a huge push on social media as of late by the Tennessee folks to get that checker Neyland going. You see the logo now as the official Tennessee football Twitter account's got the checker Neyland logo. They've been pushing this so hard that the official account says we're pretty sure that just about everybody on Twitter knows about checker Neyland by now. But the problem is we're also sure that not everybody's on Twitter. If everybody could text a buddy that you don't think knows about our plan, that would be fantastic, and then give you a little bit of a sarcastic thanks there. So they have been pushing this hard. You know, one section's going to wear the orange, one section's going to wear the white. They've done this a whole bunch before. I'm going to do it again on Saturday. And honestly, you know, I'm not a Tennessee fan, but to see Neyland Stadium matter again, I think that's a good thing for the SEC. I think it's one of those venues that has had a lot of relevance historically for this league. And as a big-time venue, Neyland Stadium hasn't mattered a lick, and I don't know how long, right? And this is not mockery. It's just the truth. Tennessee's also had a horrendous time selling tickets for a long time. These Tennessee fans have just been through so much. And honestly, Tennessee's a rival to my favorite team, and so every now and then I like to poke a jab at them or something like that. But in this particular instance, I'm not going to do it. I actually kind of have a little bit of commiseration, a little bit of sympathy for them. When you have, you know, in the aftermath of Lane Kiffin tucking tail and running after 1 year, when the aftermath of that is failed coach after failed coach after failed coach, there's only so much that one fan base can kind of endure before they just lost their edge. Well, new good faith here around Josh Heupel. For now, that edge has returned, and they're willing to show that support. They're willing to make for a night game everything that Neyland Stadium used to be, and I think it's pretty fun. I think we get ourselves something pretty good there coming up on Saturday night with a good football game between Tennessee and Ole Miss. Can't wait to watch that one and obviously talk more about that with you next week here on SEC Country Live there as well. I've got news about Ed Orgeron coming out of LSU. We'll talk about that. News coming out of Georgia and the quarterback situation involving JT Daniels. What is being said about Daniels and what Smart is doing to push back against some of that a little bit. We'll do all that here coming up in a moment. Before that, though, let's hit on some of the games we haven't quite discussed as of yet. The other games around the SEC, let's preview all of these from a point spread standpoint with our friends at BetUS here. And we'll roll through these point spreads. I'll give you a quick thought on these games. Georgia's a 23.5-point favorite against Kentucky. Let me give you one number to know about Georgia going into this. And I don't think Georgia gets challenged in terms of the final score here, but I do think that Kentucky plus 23.5 points could be worth a look. Georgia in 6 previous games under Kirby Smart the week before a bye is actually 0-6 against the spread in those contests, including 2 outright losses. I'm thinking 2016 to Vanderbilt as an example of this. I'm thinking 2018 and a 20-point loss to LSU as an example of this. Georgia has, historically speaking, under Kirby Smart, dating back to 2016, not been good against the spread there in those conditions. That is worth considering as you're thinking about Georgia at home as the number 1 team in the country and a very, very big number against Kentucky. Auburn, Arkansas, one thing to know here, Arkansas's 5-1 against the spread this season. Covered last week against Ole Miss despite the outright loss. Only game in which the Hogs have not covered this season 2 weeks ago at Georgia. Auburn, by contrast, has failed to cover 3 times already this year. The Georgia State game, last week against Georgia, and obviously on the road at Penn State back in the month of September. That's enough to get me to lean in the direction of Arkansas here. Florida and LSU. Can you imagine LSU getting 10.5 points at home against anybody? But that's the story on Saturday with Florida coming in, and believe it or not, I think I actually like Florida here in this spot. I think the quit factor could be high for LSU for reasons I'll discuss more in a moment. I would never, ever, ever, ever take LSU or go against LSU at home getting that many points, typically speaking. But in this particular case, there's just a lot of bad vibes coming out of Baton Rouge right now. A&M's on the road against Missouri. No big thought from me on this other than the fact that A&M's been okay, over the course of its last 20 games, even in addition to the win last week against Alabama. You might worry about a flat spot here and a letdown, but the quality of the opponent also has to be a part of this discussion, and Missouri is not very good right now. I think there's an argument for Vanderbilt not playing terrible against South Carolina, just given the fact that we've seen the Gamecocks fail to cover twice already this year, although there are 4 instances when they have covered. It's a lot to ask South Carolina to beat anybody by 3 touchdowns right now, even a lowly Vanderbilt team. But ultimately, South Carolina is the right side to be on. It's a little too contrarian to talk yourself into Vanderbilt. Same way on the Mississippi State game. I think there's a little bit of a contrarian play to talk yourself into Mississippi State plus the 17, given Alabama's struggles on the road thus far this year. But once again, that's just a little too cute for words. And then finally, the Ole Miss-Tennessee game. This is probably the SEC spread I like the most. Ole Miss is just infrequently a road favorite. Only happened twice last year in Lane Kiffin's debut season. The Rebels were 1-1 against the spread in those conditions. And going back to the start of the 2016 season, Ole Miss only been a road favorite 7 times. Rebels are 1-6 against the spread as a road favorite since the start of the 2016 season. That's the program that Lane Kiffin inherits. He hasn't done enough yet to change that. It's enough for me to like Tennessee with the points at home on Saturday. I will take the Vols there. And I want to remind you that as you're making your own plays here this weekend, betus.com, the website to go to. When you use the promo code SEC125, you're going to receive a 125% bonus on your initial deposit. That means that before you even win your first bet, you've got more money in your account. BetUS is going to put more money in your account than you're putting in there. They're giving you 125% of what you're putting in there, which means that you're already a big winner before you even win your first bet. Then after that, you can enjoy what has been true for more than 25 years. BetUS becoming America's most beloved sportsbook by taking good care of the players who play there, including that big initial deposit when you sign up. SEC125 is the code. 125% bonus on your initial deposit. That's what you get. BetUS.com, but use the promo code SEC125 to take advantage of the offer. All right, let's talk about LSU here for a moment as we go all points bulletin for a moment here on SEC Country Live and bounce around the league here just a bit. So for LSU, as I said, hosting Florida on Saturday, big underdog at home, likely to be a lot of empty seats. Death Valley has not been full as of late, and even more empty seats expected to be on hand for this game there against Florida. And for an LSU team that, you know, on the heels of one loss, goes and loses to Kentucky again this past Saturday, and everything just sort of seems like a little bit of a mess around Ed Orgeron. He made his appearance in the Baton Rouge radio program that T-Bob Hebert and Jacob Hester host. They questioned him about his resilience and what he said during press conferences, but boy, Orgeron, when he speaks, sounds like a guy who probably knows he's nearing the end of his rope. Let me let you hear Orgeron from Baton Rouge Radio. You can judge for yourself. There's no Orgeron here? All right, well, that's disappointing. So no Orgeron there, but what Orgeron does say is that as of now, no one's told him anything about his job and that he's out there just doing what he can and obviously going to keep fighting, keep coaching, and trying to win as many games as he can, play as hard as he can. You have to wonder, though, a little bit if the LSU players feel the same way when you've got another example of a high-profile injury that'll now take an LSU player off the field for the rest of the season. Now, listen, I think you got to be really fair about stuff like this because when it comes to injuries, I think the worst thing you can do is spend a lot of time speculating. But let me show you the quote here that a reporter has in terms of what's going on with Elias Ricks. We've already known that Derek Stingley, the LSU cornerback, is out, and now the other guy on the other side, another All-American level player, Eli Ricks, is now out there as well. And the word here is that he's going to undergo surgery for what's being described as a nagging injury. And my understanding is the actual description is no more specific than that, just a nagging injury. Orgeron saying that Ricks and his family have decided to get it operated on and get it fixed. I mean, I hear a couple of things there that would make me very concerned if I'm an LSU fan. The idea that it's not a specific injury, just sort of nagging injury. Boy, what does that sound like? Doesn't sound like anything that's all that specific, and it's not. According to Orgeron, it's coming from the player and his family. This is also a player that was rumored to be going into the transfer portal during the offseason. That never materialized. But you can't help but think about all of this. In the same story involving Derek Stingley, and the same story involving Keyshawn Butte, and all the players that LSU's had going to the transfer portal during the offseason, and going back to last season, Eric Gilbert opting out, and all kinds of high-profile opt-outs that LSU has dealt with. I think the question you're left to ask is, do LSU players want to play for Ed Orgeron? because given any choice not to, whether because of injury or COVID concern or just to even prepare for the NFL draft, that's what players have chosen to do. They've chosen to bolt LSU when they get a chance. And that's the thing that may get Orgeron fired more than anything else. It's not just the losing of the games, but it's the fact that he's had a hard time maintaining any sense of stability with the program. He can't hold on to a roster. There's massive, massive attrition. And the players are the first to know. They're the ones that know the inner workings of a program. They know what's happening. They know the trajectory of the program. And players who are having a good time, they want to stay a part of that. Players who are not having very much fun, they'll look for the first exit sign. And that seems to be what's happening at LSU. In the case of Ricks, he may be dealing with a very serious injury that surgery is truly required for. And obviously, if he is, prayers to him as he undergoes all that recovery. But boy, when all of these absences, and when they're not particularly explained very well, when all these absences start to pile up for LSU, at a certain point, you sort of just can't help but wonder about all of that. Speaking of injuries, also a little bit of that going on at Georgia as well at the most high-profile position in the sport, and that is quarterback. But a very strange thing has happened for Georgia in the wake of starting quarterback JT Daniels' injury that at one point in time was an oblique and has turned into a lat, but has kept him off the field for really the majority of this season here to this point in time. With Daniels sidelined and not playing, Georgia's actually been playing pretty well. Georgia's gotten a game effort from its backup quarterback, Stetson Bennett, who a lot of folks saw last year play well at times for the Bulldogs. Come from behind winning against Arkansas, big performance statistically against Auburn and Tennessee, before finally losing in Alabama, getting hurt against Florida, and after that, JT Daniels was able to take the reins and become the Georgia starting quarterback. But in light of how well Bennett is playing for UGA right now, there have been some voices, both in the media and kind of in the world of college football and coaching, who've wondered, well, maybe, just maybe, Stetson Bennett's actually the best quarterback for Georgia and not the guy in Daniels who was at one point in time thought to be the Heisman Trophy candidate, potential first-round pick. Let me give you an example here from Greg McElroy, who was quoted as saying on his radio program in WJOX that you can't justify taking Bennett out given the way that he's playing right now. And I'm not quite so sure that's true. I'm not quite so sure there's any kind of, obligation, legally speaking, that a player can't exit the game or that an injured player automatically, can't return if the guy that he's been replaced by is playing well here. I think that freedom still exists for Kirby Smart, but while maybe it's taking things too far to say that you can't take Stetson Bennett out of the game, there are some people that have been, at least over the years, close to the Georgia program are saying that maybe you shouldn't take Stetson Bennett out of the game. An example of one of these is the former Georgia linebacker, now at the state of Alabama, Thompson High School as a coach, a guy who knows the football world, knows the UGA program pretty well, Jay Gaines, who Georgia fans certainly know. A lot of other SEC fans kind of remember as well when he transferred to UGA from UAB when that program went defunct a couple of years ago. Jake Gaines was on social media this week getting a lot of attention when he first said that there's not a quarterback controversy at Georgia, but there kind of is, and he was joking about that. He gave you I always forget, is that Manny from Modern Family doing the T-SIP thing there? So Jake said that, then he comes back on Twitter to say, all I'm going to say is Stetson Bennett is 10 times harder to prepare for. He says the ability to have design quarterback runs and how to extend plays with his feet completely changes a defense's game plan. JT's awesome, he says, but you know what you're getting when it comes to Daniels, and maybe there's a little bit more mystery involved in what Stetson Bennett brings to the table. Pretty interesting stuff from Jake Gaines, the former Georgia linebacker, talking about Stetson Bennett. So that led to a moment on Monday, the Kirby Smart press conference there in Athens, where he was asked directly, hey, if JT Daniels was fully healthy, would he be your starting quarterback on Saturday? Or maybe this media guy, McElroy, the former SEC quarterback, Gaines, the coach now, the former Georgia linebacker, do maybe these guys have a point? Should it be Stetson Bennett's job? Or if Daniels was healthy, would he get the nod on Saturday when Kentucky comes to calling? This is what Smart said on Monday.
You know how I feel about hypotheticals, so it's just a hypothetical. I mean, we're trying to get JT back. He is much improved this last week. At the end of the week, he had a really productive throwing session. I guess it was Thursday maybe. And then for the game, he was able to throw more than he was the previous week. We're going to try to let him throw some today, although today will be a lighter practice. Our guys have gone really 6 consecutive heavy weeks. So heavy, even on Mondays, we've gotten after it in some of the games that didn't go to the fourth quarter. We practiced pretty hard on Mondays. So today that won't be the case. And we had a really physical 2 games in a row with the Arkansas game and the Auburn game. So there won't be so much we're able to get done today. But we'll see how he is and see where he is and see what he can do. That's always the case. But, I mean, I'm not getting into that right now. I'm worried about making sure we got a healthy quarterback and keeping our quarterbacks healthy by keeping them upright and keeping them protected.
So maybe it's somewhat interesting that Smart sidesteps the hypothetical of would Daniels play if healthy, given the chance to say, yes, he's definitely our starting quarterback. I guess you could say in that particular instance, Smart chooses to say something other than that, but ultimately that's not that important to me because I still think that JT Daniels is Georgia's starting quarterback, whether Smart says it there or not. What was interesting to me is, and think about the timeline here, that's Monday, Smart saying we hope he's able to do more in practice on Tuesday. Well, on Tuesday night, we heard from Smart again. Exactly what was Daniels able to do during practice? Kirby talked about it at the time.
He got to throw a lot on Monday. So Monday he threw, I want to say 30 or 40 balls, and he got upwards of 30 yards, felt pretty good, took some snaps. We didn't do a whole bunch Monday. We didn't do as much as we normally do. And then today he probably didn't do as much. And so he was a little more limited. He took some snaps. He threw the ball some. But we're kind of going off Ron's protocol. He has him on a pitch count daily, following that. And we check and see if he swells or if he has any soreness after it. And good news is he hasn't had any soreness the last 2 days, not extensive soreness. And we were able to go back the next day and continue to get some. But he hadn't been able to do a whole lot, a little more than he did the week before.
So in our comment section over here, Joel Moody says this is all just coach speak. Kirby Smart being coy could very well be. Marvin Roach also says that he feels like it's the media trying to turn this into a story, create some sort of narrative about it. And I do think to a degree, whether it's the media doing this, whether it's stakeholders of the Georgia program doing this, fans doing this, whatever, I think it is taking something that ought to be considered a positive for UGA, the fact that the backup quarterback has played well with the starting quarterback not available, and turning it into a negative of, well, now Bennett's playing so well that Kirby Smart's hands are tied. Smart's options aren't reduced because Stetson Bennett's playing well. Smart's options are enhanced. They are increased. And if we're led to believe that JT Daniels dealing with a similar injury to what Dak Prescott, the Dallas Cowboys quarterback, is dealing with, that if rest worked for Prescott, rest may also work for Daniels there as well. And right now, Georgia seemingly has the freedom to give Daniels the rest that he needs without worrying about it having some sort of negative effect on the football team. Right now, Stetson Bennett's play is providing Georgia with quite the luxury to give Daniels more and more rest. And I want to make my opinion on this very clear. I still think that JT Daniels is a very important player in Georgia's pursuit of a national championship. Beating Alabama head-to-head, for instance, is the kind of thing that I believe that Daniels is more suited to do than Stetson Bennett. Bennett played well in that game for a half, and ultimately a year ago when Georgia lost to Alabama, it probably wasn't Bennett that shoulders the full blame there, although we did turn the ball over a couple of times. It's probably more about the defensive breakdowns that Georgia dealt with at the time. So it's not that Stetson Bennett's completely incapable of beating Alabama. I just believe that JT Daniels has more capabilities to do that. But I also believe this, that when you hear Smart in the clip that you heard a moment ago talk about Daniels being limited once again during a Tuesday practice, that's not a good sign for a guy that's hoping to play this upcoming Saturday. My expectation is, and admittedly my expectations on this and my assumptions on Daniels and his health have been wrong already before this year, but my expectation and assumption is that Daniels probably does not play this Saturday against Kentucky. Georgia has a bye week next week, as we mentioned a moment ago, and then in 2 weeks' time gets ready to play Florida. That's the time maybe that it's more likely that you see JT Daniels. And after all of that extra rest, if Daniels isn't healthy enough to be a full go and a full participant in practice leading up to the game against the Gators that Saturday, then it becomes reasonable to assume that he just simply won't be fully healthy for this entire season. And at that point, you have to recalibrate everything you thought that he'd be able to provide Georgia and maybe take more time to reassess exactly what Georgia can be if it's only Bennett who's UGA starting quarterback there for this season. All right, SEC Country Live will wrap up with a pretty funny SEC LOL in a moment as a little bit more chatter about Lane Kiffin's return to Knoxville gets some attention here today. Let me take a couple of comments before we get there. Marvin Roach says, who I quoted a moment ago, says when it comes to Bennett and Daniels that he loves them both, and I believe that's the appropriate action and thought process that a Georgia fan ought to have. You got to be glad you have them both, and at different points in time this season, you may need them both. I think that's probably true. Over here on YouTube, a couple of comments over there. A lot of folks reacting to Bo Molinari over here, and it's good to see Bo stirring things up in the YouTube comment section. That's always kind of a nice thing to see. Oh, by the way, Bo also wants to call me out. Now, I don't mind doing this. He says, can we talk about how wrong you were last week about the 12th man? Johnny Manziel on the sideline. Aggies couldn't move the ball. The dude from Bet USA was totally wrong. It's actually Bet US, but nonetheless. So what Bo's referencing is, Bo's a big Texas A&M fan. What Bo is referencing is that last week we talked about a relatively quiet, soft, home field advantage for Texas A&M, that the crowd, typically speaking, has not made a big impact on Aggies games, and Texas A&M's lost way too many home games. Now, that fact is undeniable, despite what happened last Saturday against Alabama. But you're right, in the aftermath of Alabama losing there, it does not look good to be taking shots at the Texas A&M crowd, which we did do before that game on last Wednesday's show. You're right about that. But here's the thing, Bo. I praised Texas A&M all offseason long. In fact, when A&M was losing those games to Arkansas and Mississippi State, I was getting grief left and right for some of the stuff that I said about A&M during the offseason as a team that I believe is a real threat, not this year. They weren't my pick to win the SEC West this year, but an eventual program that overtakes Nick Saban in Alabama. So I was giving a lot of love to A&M during the offseason. So you can get on me for what I said last week, but you got to make sure you give me credit for what I've been saying here over the course of the last few months, because I've been higher on A&M than most. Linda Thompson says that Georgia's going to choke and use Stetson Bennett as the scapegoat. So apparently Linda's not much of a Georgia fan there. Jeff Jones and Brian Waugh going back and forth here about the idea of A&M. He says if A&M can beat Alabama, Kentucky can beat Georgia. So I guess there's some folks around the SEC on upset watch for Kentucky on Saturday. We've actually heard from a lot of Kentucky fans in our comment section the last few weeks. Eric Green likes the idea of Sanford Stadium at Georgia one day being expanded to 100,000 folks. That might be interesting to see. Brian Waugh also in here weighing in on more stuff there as well. So good comments kind of rolling through here today. We love doing those as part of SEC Country Live each and every week. Let me finish with this for a moment, though. We also like to close out our shows in kind of an entertaining way, kind of a fun way. And there's a lot of attention being paid to Lane Kiffin returning to Knoxville, the place that he called home for a year as Tennessee's head coach. It was a rocky year, but it was nonetheless a time in which Kiffin was there in Knoxville. And apparently one of the car dealerships that Kiffin had a business relationship with wasn't too happy with its end of the bargain there with Lane Kiffin. Here's what one of the Lexus dealerships in Knoxville says. This is Lexus Rentals of Knoxville on Twitter saying, hey, Lane Kiffin, we want our Lexus back. We do not appreciate you running it into a ditch. Now, I can't confirm if Kiffin really drove the Lexus that he was given by the dealership there into a ditch, but that's the kind of thing that's being said about Kiffin as he gets ready to go back to Knoxville on Saturday, and they were all in the replies, stirring it up. So not everybody has forgiven and forgotten when it comes to Lane Kiffin. A lot of folks, apparently those that were responsible for automobiles that Kiffin was driving, apparently they're still feeling some hurt feelings about all of that. So a funny way to close us out today here in SEC Country Live. Thanks for being here, Facebook and YouTube. Appreciate all of that. And we'll see you back here again next Wednesday. It'll be a different studio for us. We're kind of in the midst of transitioning to a new studio. So next week will be kind of a makeshift studio. But eventually back in our regular spot, time-wise, nothing will change. And platform-wise, nothing will change there either. Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time for SEC Country Live. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll see you then, everybody.